You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Elis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast presented by Inside Arkansas and hosted by Andrew Elis. It's been about an hour and a half since the Razorbacks finish up their 4-game series against the Washington State Cougars. I kind of teased it in my last video that I would put out some type of video, whether it was tonight or tomorrow morning. And I sat around for about 10 minutes before I was like, yeah, we're definitely cranking out another one here. And so if you missed it, the Razorbacks did complete a 4-game sweep. They are 4-0 on the young college baseball season. They defeated Washington State 12-2 earlier today as a clean, I would say, a business-like 4-game sweep. Game 1 was ugly. It was a little bit shaky. Arkansas ends up winning 3-2 in extra innings there in the 10th inning, get a walk-off sac fly, low-scoring game, kind of sloppy. That was the coldest of the 4 games. You end up getting a run rule in game 2 there. You win 5-2 on Saturday. And I feel like this game 4 on Monday, you get a couple crooked numbers there in the later innings. You get a 5-run inning, you get a 6-run inning. I feel like we'll do a lot to maybe calm this Razorback fan base down a little bit. Good to see that. Good to see them finish on a strong note. And so you go 4-0, which is what Arkansas did not do last year in this similar situation against James Madison. I don't know if that necessarily means much, the actual win-loss total, but I do want to give a little bit of credit real quick to Washington State, who I was pretty dismissive of them leading up to the series. One, we just didn't know a ton about them. They don't have a ton of returning production. They're in year 2 under their head coach, Nathan Schote, and I believe they went 21-32 last year. So it's like, I don't know if the expectations were super high. This is just the kind of team. You look at Arkansas, you look at them, you know they have a lot of JUCO guys, which I know JUCO is not a negative in college baseball. There's a lot of teams. I mean, hell, one of the guys I'm about to talk about here today is a JUCO transfer. Arkansas certainly had their fair share of productive pieces from the JUCO level, none bigger than Dave Van Horn. So I'm not putting down JUCO, but usually when you see a roster full of JUCO guys on a team that is coming off a bad season and under a second-year head coach who we don't know anything about, you kind of do the math and you're like, all right, the Arkansas should smoke these guys. And Arkansas did smoke them in 2 games. They run ruled them twice. Once they got to the bottom of their pitching depth, you could see they were running a little thin, but I felt like those boys were scrappy and they were maybe a little bit better than I maybe forecast for them. And so I'll be interested to see how they finish out the year. But again, overall, I felt like it was a productive weekend at the office for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Not clean, not beautiful. I mean, both teams made their fair share of errors on both sides, but I felt like both teams showed up and played some pretty good baseball for 4 games. And so we will continue to recap it all and dive into it. I want to do an episode here today just basically talking about who won the weekend. Who are the winners of the weekend? A lot of these names, of course, you will know. You don't need me to spell it out for you, but I did just want to, as we continue to document this season, each week I want to come back and talk about who won the weekend. And so I've got five category or 5 names, basically not 5 names, but 5 winners this week. And then we got a couple bonus miscellaneous ones, but we want to jump right into it. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our boys over at Alumni Hall. I love going to their store at 3417 North College Avenue there in Fayetteville, right next to the Chipotle, right next to the Whole Foods where Curtis gets his groceries. Nice little location right off the exit. I promise you will not be disappointed with their store if you go check it out. My favorite thing they have is a 2 for $38 t-shirt deal, which is always nice. There's just whatever sport it is you like, football, basketball, baseball, gymnastics, softball, cricket, whatever, they've got a shirt representing it. I really like their selection. It's just the best variety. It's the ultimate Razorback shopping experience. That's what they pride themselves on. So go check those guys out in person. And if you can't do it, this link right here, insidearkansas.com/alumni hall, will take you right to their online store. You can see for yourself. You can start scouting it out with baseball season coming around. Maybe when the weather warms up, you'll be able to go get some shorts and some short sleeve shirts, some polos. They've got all that. But right now for the winter, they've also got Columbia jackets. They've got starter jackets. They've got hoodies. They've got sweatpants. Whatever it is you want, Alumni Hall's got it. And they've got it in every type of brand, every type of size you can imagine. Go check them out, man. They're really good for us. Like I said, 3417 North College Avenue is where they're located. But also check out this their online store. And you can order online at insidearkansas.com/alumni hall. They're very good to us, and we are good to them. So, okay, let's just jump right into it, man. So, again, if you've been listening to the Baumbastic Podcast, if you've been really tapped in, doing your homework and listening to all these episodes, listening to me ramble, most of what you saw this weekend wasn't necessarily stunning. Of course, it's always nice to see it for yourself. It's one thing to hear me ramble and talk about how cool a lot of these guys are, but it's one thing to get your first glimpse, especially at some of those newcomers. And I feel like nobody epitomizes that more than our first winner of the weekend, the Australian, Aussie, Brent Iredale, the third baseman for the Arkansas Razorbacks. I feel like he kind of showed us the full tool bag, man. He kind of showed us a glimpse of everything that this man is capable of. Goes 7 for 15 on the weekend, had the 2 big home runs, both of which came on Saturday, was robbed of another on Friday. Let's be clear about that. 1,000% should have 3 home runs, maybe even a 4th if you add in the wind. But he has 2 home runs on Saturday. He hit a double as well. That's a 467 average for those counting at home. Drove in 9 runs in 4 games. I predicted him to be the RBI leader for the Arkansas Razorbacks, and boy, do I feel good about that prediction right about now. He scored 4 runs himself. He had the game-winning sac fly in Friday's game, which, of course, was a little shaky performance for the Razorbacks, but he looked good. One thing I really like about what Brent Iredale was able to do this weekend, 2 walks, 1 hit by pitch, only struck out twice. A lot of these Razorback hitters are a little boomer bust. Like, there's just a little bit of that. And look, hitting is contagious. Hitting is a streaky thing. You're never just going to be, like if someone hits 330, it's not like they're going 1 for 3 every game. There's some 3 of 4s mixed in there. There's some 0 of 4s. And all these Razorbacks are going to kind of do that. Hell, just a couple weeks ago, people were kind of freaking out because Brent Iredale went, I think, 1 for 9, 1 for 10 in the weekend scrimmages with Arkansas. But we've seen this happen a good bit. And so he's going to have some weekends where he strikes out more. But I thought that was a really good sign for him. He had a bunch of hits to the opposite field. Listen, any pitch, any part of the park, home run, single, double, triple, like he can do it all. And I feel like this weekend he gave us a good little showcase of his talents. And another thing that really stuck out to me with him defensively, I thought he was great at third base. You guys haven't really heard me talk a ton about just Arkansas's team defense in general, but really Brent Iredale as a defender. Most of the stuff I've said about him is, he's going to hit home runs. He's going to hit oppo, big right-handed bat, got some speed to him. Like, he's really good. I think if I did talk about his defense, I probably said he was average to above average defensively. But based on really these last few weeks of scrimmages, he's been solid. And this weekend, I felt like he made a nice wide variety of some plays. Throwing arm looks solid. He's a good athlete. I think if I've compared him to Caden Wallace a lot in just kind of what I view for him production wise. I think that like Caden Wallace's junior year, like this is kind of that. I think Caden Wallace is maybe a little bit better athlete, but Caden Wallace is also a little bit of a freak. He was a 2nd-round draft pick for a reason, was one of the fastest guys on the team at Arkansas when he was there. And Iredale is kind of in that ilk as well. Similar builds, similar guys. I don't know if he's necessarily the level of athlete necessarily, just raw tools that Caden Wallace has. But as a defender, I actually think they're a little bit closer than I maybe gave Iredale credit for. I'd be interested to hear what you guys said, some of you experts, but I thought Iredale looked really good defensively. And overall, in Arkansas, like I said, it was a little bit of a sloppy weekend at the office for Arkansas on the defensive end. So it was really good to see that infield, especially the spots where not necessarily up for grabs. I thought Vahiva did a really good job at shortstop, just kind of taking care of the ball, doing what he needed to do, not turning it over, not being sloppy with it. And Iredale over there at third base, really good. Those third base and shortstop, those are just magnets, man. Those are just where the ball tends to gravitate to. And so you need to be solid there. I feel like the Razorbacks are solid at those 2 spots. And you're talking about 2 of your best offensive players. So very encouraging stuff. On to our next winner. I got to go Justin Thomas, man. So Justin Thomas is a guy that really, frankly, like, he's forced his way into this battle and in the outfield is the way I describe it. But at this point, man, like, I feel like it's time for us to just assume that dude is starting. Here's the list of Razorbacks this weekend who started at the same position every game: Brent Iredale, Vahiva Aloy, Charles Davalon, and Justin Thomas. That's it. That's the list. Those other 3 guys, we've never even questioned for a minute whether or not they're going to be in the starting lineup each day, or at least for the most part every day. And I feel like Justin Thomas at this point, it's always subject to change. I feel like we just need to assume that is the starting left fielder for the Arkansas Razorbacks. He's doing a really good job in that 9 hole. So overall in the weekend, numbers wise, he goes 3 for 8 at the plate, led the team with 5 runs scored, drove in 1 run, had a double in there as well. 7 walks, which also lead the team. Only 1 strikeout, which was the fewest on the team. Also stole 2 bases, which led the team. And he also was thrown out. He was 2 for 3 in those stolen base attempts. But again, just kind of shows you a little bit of everything. The thing that really jumps out to me is the 7 walks, 1 strikeout. Now that's a crazy rate that I would not expect anyone to be able to keep up. He's definitely going to have his fair share of strikeouts down the stretch. And I don't know if necessarily he's going to be a 7 walk a week type of guy, but man, if that is any slight indication, like if he can even just have those 2 numbers be even with walks and strikeouts, again, I just don't think there's much of a conversation to be had about whether or not he needs to be in the lineup. And we hear Dave Van Horn talk all the time about how they like to have these different skill sets, these different athletes in there. Justin Thomas, again, I feel like is kind of the epitome of that. I thought he did a really good job, just strung together good AB after good AB, hit a couple balls really hard, didn't strike out. Like I don't have much to complain about. Don't have much to complain about at all. Defensively, the only like weird moment was the ball that was like in foul ground on Friday night. I think it was game 1 in foul ground towards the fence. He had to cover a good bit of ground. Probably should have made that play, but like he's in there. He's in there for his defense. So you expect him to be a pretty good above average fielder out there in left field. Again, I feel like he has done enough, at least in the early going here in the spring and through 1 weekend of play. I feel really good about him and kind of what he brings to the table. Feel like he can be that kind of spark plug guy at the bottom of the lineup. Interested to see his evolution and interested to see what he looks like when we get into SEC play. If he's going to continue to just get on base and wreak havoc on other teams, man, it's exciting to watch, man. And I feel like he's a guy that the fan base will quickly fall in love with really quickly if they haven't already. On to my third winner of the weekend. This is one where I couldn't just narrow it down to one guy. I just went ahead and said starting pitchers for the Arkansas Razorbacks. And the reason why it was hard to distinguish between these guys, they all put up similar numbers. They combined for 20 innings pitched and even 5 apiece, 9 hits total between the 4 guys, 4 runs spread out amongst the 4 guys, 4 walks, each guy had 1, and 29 strikeouts overall, man. For those counting at home, if my math is correct, that is a 1.80 ERA for Arkansas starting pitchers. Of course, Gabe Gackle got the ball in game 1 for Arkansas on Friday, really set the tone. Just had the 1 hit and the 1 walk. I believe he also hit a guy, 7 strikeouts. Good for a 0.63 opponent's average there. He did not get the win in that game because Arkansas ended up deciding it later. And then Zach Root, I feel like in game 2, you saw a little bit of his skill set, man, what he's like. Pounds the strike zone, works quick, mixes speeds a ton. He really just gets in a rhythm. I actually was talking about this on the watch along the other day. I can't remember if it was with Curtis or John, but sometimes you'll be watching Razorback pitch or Razorback hitters, and they're facing, whether it's a big time Friday night starter in the SEC, or maybe it's just some random lefty from a mid-major that shuts them down. But you feel that and you're like, man, this pitcher is just on a roll. He's just in rhythm. He's throwing strikes. He just kind of finds a groove. And that's something that I think has frustrated all of us when we're watching Arkansas hit, is you just feel like the starting pitcher they're facing is in a groove. You're like, man, how is that guy just pounding the zone? Zach Root is one of those guys, like every inning kind of feels like that. It just feels like he's confident. He's getting the ball. He doesn't take much time at all. I feel like he's going to have some games this year when he really gets going and he goes 6, 7, 8 innings where it's going to be like a 1 hour, 58-minute game because he just works quick, gets in that rhythm, has that interesting little windup. He's a lot of fun to watch. And I mean, really, frankly, he ends up giving up 1 run on 2 hits. I think you can make a case that Zach Root was the best starting pitcher Arkansas had this week, and he had the 8 strikeouts. Gage Wood, I thought, gave a very, very strong account of himself. His fastball was really electric on Saturday. He ends up going 5 innings, 2 runs, 2 hits. Didn't get a ton of help from his defense. Like, I feel like his final line is actually not as good as how he pitched. Dave Van Horn talked about it after the game that they really need him to land that breaking ball a little bit more, which really typically, like with Gage Wood, typically the breaking ball is kind of what you expect him to land more often than not. But it seemed like they just kind of had it was fastball heavy for him, and the fastball was electric, man. It was up to 97. It was consistently 95, 96. He carried his velocity well. You feel really good about him and kind of the development he's making. We'll see what they do with this decision, whether it's him or Beidelshees that gets the ball in game 3 this weekend in Arlington. But regardless, both guys clearly gave a very strong account of themselves. I think you should feel very comfortable giving the ball to either one of them. And I think both guys are clearly going to throw a ton of innings for this Razorback team. Easily, no doubt, circle of trust guys. And speaking of Landon Beidelshees, he actually gave up 4 hits, 2 of which were bunt singles there, and 2 of which came in that final 5th inning. So weirdly enough, he gave up the most hits. So he currently has the highest opponent batting average at 235. I actually think Beidelshees is going to end up being the guy who has the lowest opponent's batting average of those 3 starters, besides maybe Gackle. But I feel like he's a guy that lefty, 92, 94, can touch up to 95, 96 if you really need. Mixes speeds well. That curveball he was throwing, man, it looked like a Frisbee up there, man. It was getting a ton of swings and misses. I feel like lefties are going to hit a crisp like 050 against Landon Beidelshees. You're going to see teams probably load up as many righties as they can against Beidelshees. He's just the kind of guy that is going to be really tough in left-on-left matchups. Not that Root isn't going to be, but Root, I feel like, is kind of, he mixes speed so well. It's kind of a similar thing, whether it's righty or lefty. He kind of has weapons to get either guy out, but Beidelshees in particular, I just don't know how lefties are going to hit him, man. So it's going to be very interesting to see him. He looked very comfortable, threw a ton of strikes, had the 1 walk later, but there was a stretch through 4 innings. I think he had 46 pitches through 4. If he's able to be that efficient, man, it's going to be really tough. It's really tough to get stuff going against him. Overall, I just feel like starting pitching really lived up to the billing that we've been giving this team all preseason. Looking around the country, too, man, there's not a ton of teams who really feel that comfortable with their starting pitching. The one team in the SEC that I feel like can maybe rival what Arkansas has in their starting rotation is LSU. Now, we will have that conversation later on down the road, and we'll continue to monitor. But I think some people, you see the numbers that Arkansas starting rotation put up in opening weekend, and you think, oh, they're facing, mediocre competition. I'm sure there's a ton of teams doing it. There's really not that many teams that truly have 3 guys they feel comfortable about, let alone 4. I feel like Arkansas and LSU were kind of in a class of their own in that regard. Moving on to our 4th winner of the weekend, and this one is actually just one individual, although it could be a little bit of a combo thing, but I went Carson Wiggins. And there was only 2, I believe. Let me make sure I fact check myself, and I'm not lying here. Only 2 Razorback freshmen made their debut this weekend. Part of that was because you had the 2 run rules, so that took out 4 innings where you could have maybe gotten. Steele Eves, I saw him getting loose in the bullpen. I know not Parker Coyle. Tag Ange is another guy that they thought might get in there, and you could probably make the case for a few other. Ross Felder is a guy that I know that we're excited. Maybe we'll get to see him soon. The Springdale kid. But Carson Wiggins and Cole Gibbler were the only 2 freshmen to throw this weekend. Cole Gibbler is a guy that I've been just could not be raving more about the guy. He ended up going 1 inning, issued a walk, and then gets a double play, scoreless inning. Nothing doing with him. Struck out the first hitter he faced in his collegiate career. He looked awesome, but they brought him into a little bit of a low leverage situation. So not that it doesn't matter, not that it's, we should just ignore it. Still awesome to see him go out there and pitch well in his Razorback debut. But the reason I have Carson Wiggins as a winner is because of the situation Arkansas brought him into. They bring him into a 5-2 game in the 9th inning. He was the first Razorback to record a save this season. Obviously, it's early in the year. Christian Fouch had just thrown in a very high leverage situation. I believe it was a tie game when Fouch came into the game. But Carson Wiggins, I think it says a lot about him that they trusted him to make his collegiate debut in the 9th inning of a 3-run game. Not for nothing, it was a 3-2 game when they started getting him warmed up. It seemed like he was going in that 9th no matter what. If it was a 3-2 game, 1-run, 9th inning, they were going to bring Carson Wiggins in. Again, I think it's just a testament to how they see him. And it's something that's, again, not surprising. We've talked about this all offseason, that they were probably going to use him in this type of setup, potential closing type of role. But it was good to see him go out there and not only look the part, kind of was jaw-dropping how good he was. We knew he had really good stuff. We knew the arsenal was big time. There's a reason why he had so much buzz as a prospect coming out of high school. And hell, we saw his older brother who had his struggles at Arkansas, but had pretty tantalizing stuff. So we knew that this guy could really fill it up. He was I think he touched 101 in the fall. How about your first 4 pitches of your collegiate career? Each go over 100 miles an hour. Carson Wiggins averaged 99.1 miles an hour on his fastball. Let me make that clear. Averaged 99.1 miles an hour on his fastball. Hell, it's one thing to touch 99.1. That alone, if you do that as a freshman, you're going to get a ton of buzz around the country. Wow, this freshman's touching 99.1. This MFer averaged 99.1 miles per hour on his fastball. That's special stuff right there. Had to battle through some adversity as well. Like, it wasn't just a come in and mow him down, get him out of there. He got a couple weak pop up, weak ground out. Nothing too crazy. I think he had a ground out right back to him for the second out. But he ends up getting a strikeout. But he had to, again, he gives up a double, which shouldn't have happened. He had a pop up that Ryder Helfrich should have caught behind home plate. Ends up dropping. I think it was either the next pitch or the pitch after. Gets doubled down the left field line. And so, you're in your collegiate debut save situation. The tying run is on deck. There's 2 outs. It's like, holy cow. Everyone's been telling Carson Wiggins for years, oh, you're going to be a stud. You're going to get drafted. You're going to make all this money. You're going to be a closer. You're going to start in the big leagues. You're going to do all this stuff. For an 18-year-old kid to go out there and perform in that situation, in that moment, and to come back and get a strikeout, I thought was really impressive. So, again, it's less about the outing itself. I mean, he threw 20 pitches. I'm not going to overreact and really dissect every pitch. But I just feel like what he did in that moment, showing up when the lights are the brightest, I thought that was really impressive. And I thought and if we're going to talk about the stuff, mixed in a couple sliders that I thought were pretty impressive as well. Should have got the call on one of them probably. I thought everything he threw was around the plate. Obviously, he threw mostly fastballs, and so you expect, fastballs a little bit easier to command. But I thought the location of his fastballs was really impressive. And so, I mean, the swing and miss he got was on one of those fastballs that's just right on the outside corner where you couldn't run up there and walk it up to the catcher any better. So I think that's very encouraging. The stuff we knew was good, but I also just feel like, and I've said this a few times now, he's a little bit more polished than his older brother was at this stage in his career. I think he's more equipped to handle these type of situations from a mentality standpoint, but also I feel like he's just a little bit more developed as a pitcher at this stage. His windup, delivery, all that just looks really good. You just don't see many 18, 19-year-olds that are as big as he is and have the stuff that he is able to really control it. It's one thing to have a Ferrari, but can you actually get on the road and drive it? I think Carson Wiggins can drive it, man. I think it's really cool to see that. So I was really encouraged by his outing. And again, a lot of this we expected. We all kind of just assumed Carson Wiggins was going to pitch at the end of ball games and he was going to be awesome. So it's not like it's, super, it's like a big development that he's doing this, but it's just one thing to, again, like I said, it's one thing to hear me talk about it. It's another thing to go see the guy go out there and do it. And so credit to him, man. I do not want anyone to overlook that or realize how special what he's doing is and what he's about to do in his freshman season is. Could not be more excited about his debut. And then speaking of freshmen, we got to talk about the freshman catcher, Zane Becker, who I feel like is my fifth winner of the weekend. I also want to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back. I don't do that often. You guys know I'm a very humble guy. I would never overly dramatize my role. I would never try and make myself out to seem better than I really am. But I do want to give myself just a little bit of credit because I feel like I've been on this Zane Becker train for a while now, even going back to the fall where it kind of became clear to me early on, just as someone who was going to the scrimmages and watching, not saying that I was out there from a scouting standpoint. I was like, well, his pop time is this and that guy's pop time is that. It wasn't really that, but I just noticed Zane Becker was catching almost every game, and Elliot Peterson was catching here and there. Elliot Peterson being the JUCO guy that Arkansas brought in that hit 517. When they landed Elliot Peterson, we all as a fan base and as a media department, we all kind of assumed, all right, there's your backup catcher. You're gonna have Ryder Helfrich as your starter. You're bringing in this guy from JUCO, kind of the Parker Rowland ilk. He's going to be your backup catcher. That makes some sense. He could swing it a little bit. Sure, all fine and dandy. It didn't take long throughout fall ball before it became kind of clear that Zane Becker was going to be a little bit of an issue here. Got off to a little bit of a slow start, but you started to see some of that power and some of that pop he can bring to the plate towards the end of fall, and he really picked up right where he left off in the spring. I think DVH said it after the game the other day that he's been one of the better hitters on the team in these scrimmages leading up to the season. And that's true. I mean, he's been with the non-starting squad, but he's been hitting 2, 3, 4 every scrimmage. Kind of tells you how they feel about his bat. He got in there as a pinch runner on Friday in game 2 ends up getting the start at catcher in game 3 on Saturday, goes 2 for 3 with 2 doubles, one of which being a huge 2-out RBI double to dead central, just burnt the center fielder. The dude's got some pop at the plate, man. He's got some pop. He's a guy that, look, am I saying he's about to overtake Ryder Helfrich as a starting catcher? No. And I don't think you should be saying that either. I've seen a few little rumblings. That's not what I'm doing here. That's not what I'm doing. That's not what any of us should be doing. But regardless, no matter who's the starting catcher, and it is going to be Ryder Helfrich, you don't want him catching every single game, especially throughout SEC play. You're going to play a few double headers. You're going to have those weeks where you have 5 games, 2 midweeks and 3 on the weekend. You really don't want your catcher, who's also going to be an important bat for you, catching all the time and wearing down his body to the point where maybe his batting is going to dip off a little bit because he's catching so much. And, it's a lot to put on someone to handle the staff and be hitting in the middle of the order. And so I think it's very important that Arkansas has another catcher that they feel really good about. I feel like Zane Becker pretty much overnight became that guy. Like, I think he's one of those freshmen again that showed some flashes in the fall, but really during Christmas break, that's when he kind of took that next step mentally and became much more equipped and ready to come in and contribute for this team right away. I feel like he's good behind the plate. The throwing arm, we didn't see it tested this weekend, I don't believe, but the throwing arm is kind of the question mark with him, but it seemed to be fine in these scrimmages leading up to the season. I feel like he does a good job calling pitches back there, blocking pitches, receiving. You don't really notice him much, which is what you want, especially with a freshman catcher making his debut. And if he's going to hit a couple doubles in his first career start, it's just kind of a bonus. I'm really encouraged by what I saw from him. I think he's going to continue to get starts on the weekend. He'll certainly get some action in midweek games, but I mean, there's going to be plenty of times throughout the season where they're going to say, hey, it's Saturday. We're playing Texas. Let's get Ryder Helfrich in there at DH and let Zane Becker handle the catching today. And I think he's clearly trending toward being able to handle stuff like that, which is really encouraging. So those are our 5 winners of the weekend. Few miscellaneous ones I just wanted to throw out here. The bonus winners of the weekend. One is DVH's weather guy. I've referenced DVH's weather guy a few times. I don't know who he is. I honestly don't. He's a mystery man, but he's a hero. Every time Arkansas ends up redoing their schedule for a given weekend in baseball, they wind up making the exact right decision. It kind of works out perfectly. And all week, we were all kind of looking around at the weather, looking at the radar and saying, I don't know if they're going to be able to get 4 games in. It's going to be cold. It's going to be wet. It's going to be muggy. Like, I just don't know if they're going to be able to do it. We were all kind of skeptical, myself included. They end up moving the doubleheader on Friday, which worked out perfectly well. I mean, it was cold, but you were able to get both games in. Cool. You play on Saturday. You move that game up an hour, which in hindsight, maybe that was the one mistake because it ended up raining for a good bit of the first 3 or 4 innings, but it was just a drizzle. It wasn't anything crazy. They were able to get that game in before the rain really picked up later and before it got all crazy and icing over like it was on Sunday. I think Sunday they literally had snow at Baum-Walker Stadium. The fact that they were able to get all 4 games in, that's great. I also want to give a shout out to the grounds crew who just it's a thankless job and it's a tough job keeping that field ready day in and day out, depending on, I mean, the weather up here in Northwest Arkansas is crazy. But this time of year, especially when it's freezing cold, it's rainy, it's muggy. A lot of times you see college baseball games, you turn it on and that field, it's basically a slip and slide all over the place. It's muddy, stuff everywhere. It just gets yucky throughout the weekend. Credit to the grounds crew at Baum-Walker Stadium, man. They did a really good job giving Arkansas a playable surface week in and week out. And speaking of Baum-Walker Stadium, that's another winner of the weekend. Shout out to the Arkansas Razorbacks, who have now won 700 games at Baum-Walker Stadium. This was their number 700 on Monday. Of course, it's a stadium that has undergone some renovations over the years, and it only became Baum-Walker Stadium. Was that like 4 or 5 years ago? But shout out to all the teams, coaches, players, everybody who's contributed to these 700 wins, of which there are many. And shout out to Norm DeBryan, man. One, just because shout out to Norm DeBryan always, like every day we could say that. But it's just cool to see because, I mean, when he was coaching at Baum-Walker way back in the day when it was George Cole Field and all that, it's the stadium itself has grown a ton over the years. I can't imagine how rewarding it is for Norm DeBryan to go to Baum-Walker Stadium, which, by the way, he's there like freaking every day. For him to be able to see what it's become and what it's turned into, Obviously, Dave Van Horn, his protege, had a huge part in kind of raising the bar there, but it all started with Norman and the vision he had for the program. So shout out to everybody, man. It's just really cool to see a number like that. I haven't done the math and seen like how many wins per year it is, but I've been able to be there, blessed to be there for I don't know how many, maybe a couple hundred of those. It's just cool, man. It's always cool to have a milestone like that and be able to celebrate. Last couple winners, the winners of the weekend. Anyone who predicted that a Razorback infielder projected top bat would struggle opening weekend. This is a thing that just happens every year. I don't know what it is. It's just a thing that seems like it's destined to happen. In 2022, you had Peyton Stovall, who starts in the leadoff spot. This blue chip freshman that's preseason freshman of the year. We're all placing all this stuff on him. He stinks opening weekend. He stunk the few weekends after that and just took a while to get going to the point where he was out of the lineup. He's in and out. He gets banged up. Is he ever really going to play? And then ends up going on a crazy run down the stretch and ends up being one of Arkansas's best hitters. But as we all remember, his Razorback career didn't start off that way. Caleb Calley in 2023 was the guy who dominated. He was the Brent Iredale of his season, of his team, where every day we were at the scrimmages and we were like, holy cow, Arkansas's got this JUCO third baseman who's just the man. And I don't know what his started off, but he went 0 for 10 opening weekend or something like that. Ends up going like 2 for 24 to start his Razorback career. Took him a while to get going. And last year, of course, it was Vahiva Aloy, who, again, all the scrimmages leading up was just hitting home runs left field, right field, dead center, off the foul pole, inside the park, like whatever. He was just dominant in the scrimmages. We're all hyping him up. He starts off like 2 of 20 in his Razorback career. He actually wasn't that bad opening weekend. It was more in Arlington where he really struggled. So maybe we're not out of the woods yet, but Nolan Souza appears to be the next Razorback destined to suffer through the same fate of getting off to a slow start after dominating all offseason. Was a little surprised to see Arkansas just outright bench him against left-handed pitchers twice. I don't know if I love that. In fact, I'm probably going to talk about this a little bit more in depth tomorrow. But it does appear Nolan Souza is that guy. Friendly bit of advice. We do this every year where we freak out and overreact to opening weekend and we convince ourselves that this guy that was super hyped up actually sucks because he went 1 for 8 or whatever. Let's give Nolan Souza more than 7 at-bats to get it going. Can we agree on that? My final winner of the weekend would be haters of small ball, myself included. You guys know I hate small ball, and I don't hate small ball. I caution against it being like the way you really want to operate your baseball team. But kind of all offseason, that's been the talk, is that, hey, Arkansas is going to be doing this brand new brand of baseball. They're going to be wheeling and dealing and laying down bunts, drag bunt, hit and run, all that. Arkansas finished the weekend with 0 sacrifice bunts. Now, that is a little bit misleading because they tried to lay down a couple and got walked, or there was an error. Like, for example, I think Cam Kojal ended up getting credited with a hit where he tried to lay down a bunt first and second with 0 outs, and actually did lay down a pretty good bunt kind of right to the third baseman who ends up throwing it away. So that would have and should have been a sacrifice, but it definitely clearly was not like a huge part of what Arkansas had going on. You didn't see a ton of that going around. Arkansas ended up attempting 9 stolen bases, and they were 5 of 9 on those stolen bases. And again, I said, like, last year, Arkansas they were 44 of 55 in 60 games. So roughly just under 1 attempt per game. And, they would hit on that 1 attempt more often than not, but it wasn't a huge part of what they're doing. I've been on record saying they are going to steal more bases. No doubt about it. I would expect that number to go from 44 to maybe 60, 65. It'll go up a little bit. But I always caution against people who felt like this was going to be a team that just, anytime there's a runner on first, you got to watch out. I mentioned Justin Thomas, who had a couple stolen bases. He's going to steal his fair share of bases. Nolan Souza, who I know everybody doesn't want in the lineup anymore after 7 at-bats, when he's on base, and as a matter of fact, I think he did steal a base after his 1 hit of the weekend. And so he's going to be a guy that steals some bags. Iredale will have some. Aloy will have some. But overall, this is not going to be a team that's just running loose, running wild, no matter how many a lot of these guys want. So haters of small ball, we got to win this weekend. And so we expect that to continue. But seriously, though, I appreciate everybody for tapping in and enjoying the Baumbastic Podcast. We'll be back tomorrow on Tuesday to continue to dive into all the different factors going on with the Razorback baseball team this weekend. But again, appreciate everybody for being here. let's continue to enjoy this season, man. Arkansas is 4-0. The vibes are high. Hope I see everybody in Arlington. I'm going to be there with my smoking hot girlfriend. We'll be celebrating our 3-year anniversary. So it's going to be fun. Again, we will continue to crank out some content leading up to the weekend to preview it all and talk about every angle of this Razorback baseball program. As always, let me know what you want to hear me talk about. I will talk about it. I promise you. But it's been another brilliant edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. Hope everyone has a beautiful day.